The 7 Lost Girls of Milbrook. Milbrook was the kind of small town where nothing exciting ever happened. It sat between green hills and thick woods. Everyone knew each other's names and secrets. I grew up there, went away to college, and never wanted to come back. But when my grandmother died last winter and left me her old house on Willow Lane, I found myself returning to the place I had tried to forget. My name is Eliza Bennett. I write stories about old crimes that were never solved. At least, that's what I tell people. The truth is, I hadn't worked on a real story in months. My last article got me in trouble with some bad people. Coming back to Milbrook wasn't just about the house. I was hiding. When I first saw the house, it looked just like I remembered. It was big and old with faded blue paint and fancy wooden decorations. Inside, everything was the same as when I was little. The walls had old flower wallpaper. White sheets covered the furniture like ghosts. The house smelled like lavender and old books. My grandmother had worked at the library for over 40 years. She loved books. There were tall bookshelves on almost every wall of the house. I spent the first few days cleaning and going through all her old things. That's when I found something strange in the attic. Under some old blankets and Christmas decorations, there was a wooden box with beautiful flower patterns carved into it. The lock was rusted, but the box was stuck shut tight. After struggling with it, I finally got it open. Inside, wrapped in old silk cloth, were 7 leather books. Each book was a different color: red, blue, green, purple, yellow, orange, and black. On each cover was a girl's name written in gold letters: Emily, Sarah, Rebecca, Violet, Charlotte, Abigail, and Lily. I had never heard of these girls. My grandmother had never talked about them. I picked up the red book, Emily's book, and started reading. April 15, 1972. I came to Mrs. Eleanor Bennett's house on Willow Lane today. The other girls seem nice, but Violet doesn't talk much. Mrs. Bennett says we should call her grandmother, even though we're not related. She says we're her special girls now. I don't know what that means, but the house is beautiful and the food is better than at the orphanage. I think I'll like it here. Orphanage. My grandmother had taken in orphan girls. This was news to me. I read more pages about their daily life. Lessons, chores, playing in the garden. Everything seemed normal and happy until I found an entry from 3 months later. July 20th, 1972. Sarah disappeared last night. Grandmother says a nice family adopted her and she left while we were sleeping so we wouldn't be sad. But Sarah would have said goodbye to me. She would have. And I heard strange noises from the basement last night. Scratching sounds. When I asked grandmother about it this morning, she locked me in the closet for hours. I'm scared. My blood went cold. I quickly grabbed Sarah's blue book and turned to the last page. July 19th, 1972. Grandmother showed me the special room today. She says I'm ready for the final lesson. I don't want to go, but she says all her special girls must finish their education. If I pass the test, I can leave Willow Lane forever. I hope I pass. I dream of having a real family, a real home. Grandmother is coming now. I have to hide this book. If you're reading this, please help. The writing ended suddenly, like Sarah had been interrupted. My hands shook as I picked up the next book, Rebecca's. Her last entry was dated October 3rd, 1972. Then Violet's, ending January 15th, 1973. One by one, each girl had written her last words. Then nothing. Outside, the sun was going down. A tree branch scratched against the window, making me jump. I had been reading for so long that I didn't notice how late it was. As darkness came, the old house seemed to come alive with creaks and groans, like it was trying to tell me something. I took the books downstairs to the kitchen. Over a strong cup of coffee, I kept reading, trying to understand what had happened to the 7 orphan girls who lived with my grandmother in the early 1970s. According to what they wrote, my grandmother had taken them in one by one from the same orphanage, St. Agnes Home for Girls. She taught them at home, not just regular school subjects, but also what she called the old ways, herbs, strange ceremonies, and weird lessons under the full moon. And one by one they had disappeared. The next morning, I drove to the Milbrook Public Library where my grandmother had worked until she retired. The head librarian, Mrs. Pendleton, was a woman in her 60s who had worked with my grandmother for many years. "Eleanor's granddaughter. My, how you've grown," she said warmly. "I was so sorry to hear about your grandmother's death. She was a special woman." "Thank you," I said, sitting down across from her desk. "Actually, I hope you can help me with something. I found some books in the attic that belonged to girls who lived with my grandmother in the 70s. Orphans from St. Agnes." Mrs. Pendleton's smile disappeared. "Oh, those poor dears. Yes, your grandmother was very kind, taking in those girls when nobody else would. Do you remember them? Emily, Sarah, Rebecca, Violet, Charlotte, Abigail, and Lily." Mrs. Pendleton looked away quickly. "It was a long time ago. They were troubled girls, as I remember. Difficult backgrounds. Do you know what happened to them? According to their books, they disappeared one by one." "They were adopted, of course," Mrs. Pendleton said quickly. Too quickly. "Your grandmother helped find them good families. She had connections, you know. All 7 of them in less than 2 years? Yes, well, she worked very hard to find them proper homes." Mrs. Pendleton stood up suddenly. "I'm sorry, but I have a meeting to attend. Maybe we can talk about this another time." I knew she was trying to get rid of me, but I kept asking questions. "Just one more thing. Is St. Agnes still open? I'd like to check their records." "Oh no, dear. It burned down in 1975. Terrible tragedy. Nothing left but ashes." With that, she hurried away, leaving me with more questions than answers. My next stop was the town hall, where I hoped to find adoption records or any official papers about where the girls went. The clerk, a bored-looking young man, seemed confused by what I wanted. Adoptions in the 70s would be in the county records, but you'd need a court order to see those files. Privacy laws and all that. What about missing person reports? Were there any filed for young girls during that time? He looked at me strangely. "You writing a book or something?" "Just researching family history," I lied smoothly. After much talking and slipping him a $20 bill, he agreed to check. An hour later, he came back with a single folder. "Nothing on missing girls, but I found this. Might be related to what you're looking for." Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Milbrook Gazette dated August 1973. "Fire destroys shed on Willow Lane property." A shed on the property of local librarian Eleanor Bennett was destroyed by fire last night. Fire Chief Robert Miller said the blaze was likely caused by bad wiring. "It's lucky the fire didn't spread to the main house," Miller said. Mrs. Bennett was quite upset by what happened. No injuries were reported. Attached to the clipping was a handwritten note from the police officer who responded. Resident claims to have been alone at time of fire. No signs of other people on property. Strange symbols found carved into remaining shed posts. Possible occult connection. Follow-up needed. But there was no sign that anyone had followed up on the investigation. By the time I got back to the house, night had fallen again. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me as I walked up the path to the front door. The old house seemed to loom larger in the darkness, its windows like eyes following my every move. Inside, I went straight to my grandmother's study, a room I had been avoiding since I arrived. It still smelled of her perfume, a heavy mix of lavender and something earthier. The walls were lined with books on every subject you could imagine. But one section caught my eye: books about folklore, witchcraft, and ancient rituals. I had always known my grandmother was eccentric, with an interest in the supernatural. But seeing her huge collection in this new light sent a chill down my spine. On her desk sat a leather book with no title. I opened it to find my grandmother's handwriting describing what looked like rituals and spells. One page was marked with a pressed flower. The page was titled The Renewal Ritual. To achieve renewed youth and vitality, one must harness the essence of innocence. 7 vessels are required, each purified through education in the old ways. When the vessel is ready, the transfer must occur during the waxing moon. The vessel's essence is drawn out and consumed, leaving nothing but an empty shell to be discarded. I slammed the book shut, my heart pounding. This couldn't be real. My grandmother couldn't have. No, it was impossible. She was strange, yes, but she wasn't a murderer. She couldn't have been. Yet the girls' books told a different story. 7 girls taken in and educated, only to disappear one by one. And my grandmother, who had lived well into her 90s with the energy and appearance of a much younger woman, despite being born in 1910. I needed to find proof one way or another. The books mentioned a special room where the final lesson took place. I needed to find that room. I started in the basement, a place I had avoided during my cleaning. It was damp and musty, filled with old furniture and boxes. Nothing seemed unusual until I noticed that the stone wall on the far side didn't quite match the rest. The cement between the stones was newer, less weathered. I pressed against the wall, feeling for any give. To my surprise, a section moved inward when I pushed. A hidden door. My heart raced as I pushed harder, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. With shaking hands, I turned on my phone's flashlight and stepped through. The passage led to a small round room with a dirt floor. In the center was a stone altar, its surface stained dark. Around it, 7 wooden posts formed a circle, each carved with strange symbols. The same symbols mentioned in the police report about the shed fire. This wasn't a shed that had burned. It was something else entirely, something my grandmother had rebuilt in secret. On the altar lay a small fancy dagger and a leather book similar to the one in the study. This one, however, contained names and dates. 7 names I recognized, along with dates that matched when they disappeared. Next to each name was a single word, completed. I felt sick. This was really happening. My grandmother, the woman who had baked me cookies and taught me to read, had been kidnapping and murdering young girls for some twisted ritual. As I turned to leave, my flashlight lit up something I had missed. A wooden chest in the corner, identical to the one I had found in the attic. With dread pooling in my stomach, I approached it. Unlike the attic chest, this one opened easily. Inside were 7 small cloth dolls, each with a lock of hair tied around its neck. A different color for each girl. Blonde, red, black, brown. And beneath the dolls, something that made my blood freeze. Human bones, small enough to belong to children. I scrambled backward, dropping my phone in my panic. As I fumbled in the darkness, my hand touched something soft and decaying, fabric buried in the dirt floor. I screamed and ran, not stopping until I was out of the basement and at the front door, gasping for air. I needed to call the police. This was evidence of multiple murders. But as I reached for my phone, which I'd managed to grab before fleeing, I hesitated. The murders, if that's what they were, had happened over 50 years ago. My grandmother was dead. What would digging up this horror accomplish now, other than destroying her memory and shocking the town? No, that was wrong thinking. Those girls deserved justice even decades later. Their families deserved to know what had happened to them. I was about to dial when there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Pendleton from the library, her face serious in the porch light. "Eliza, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "You've been asking questions," she said without greeting me. "You found the books. How do you know about the books?" "Because I helped your grandmother hide them. After what happened. After Lily, we agreed it was best if nobody ever knew." I stepped back, letting her come in. "You knew? All this time, you knew what she did to those girls?" Mrs. Pendleton sighed heavily, sinking into an armchair. "You don't understand. None of it was supposed to happen that way. The ritual was supposed to be symbolic, a transfer of youth and vitality through meditation and connection. Your grandmother learned it from her own grandmother, who had practiced it with willing participants. But something went wrong with Emily, the first girl. The transfer became literal. She killed them," I said flatly, "for some sick ritual to make herself younger." "She didn't mean to," Mrs. Pendleton insisted. "But yes, after Emily, she found she couldn't stop. The effects were temporary, you see. She needed to complete the ritual again and again. And you helped her cover it up." "I loved her," Mrs. Pendleton whispered. "We all did. Eleanor was the heart of this town. She protected us, guided us. The things she could do, the healing, the blessings. We needed her. A cult. My grandmother had been the leader of a cult, right here in picturesque Milbrook. Why are you telling me this now? Mrs. Pendleton's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something ancient and hungry in them. Because the cycle needs to continue. Eleanor chose you as her successor. Why do you think she left you the house? Everything is prepared. The new girls are waiting. New girls? What are you talking about? St. Agnes was rebuilt under a different name. The Sunshine Home for Girls. 7 new vessels, ready for their education. I backed away, reaching for my phone. You're insane. I'm calling the police. Mrs. Pendleton smiled, a terrible knowing smile. The police chief is one of us, dear. As is the mayor, the school principal, and most of the town council. We've been waiting for you. Eleanor promised you would come. I'm nothing like her. I won't do this. You already are like her. Haven't you noticed? The headaches, the vivid dreams, the intuition that's become almost like mind reading? Your grandmother began the transfer before she died. That's why she grew so weak at the end. She gave her power to you, her blood. All you need to do is complete the cycle to fully realize your potential. I had been having headaches and strange dreams since arriving in Milbrook. I thought it was stress and the dust in the old house. But what if? No, this was madness. I wouldn't let them manipulate me. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. Get out of my house. Mrs. Pendleton stood, straightening her cardigan. Think about it, Eliza. The power to heal, to know things beyond normal perception, to live far beyond a normal lifespan. All you have to do is continue what Eleanor started. After she left, I locked every door and window in the house. Then I went back to the books, reading every entry carefully, looking for anything that might help me understand what I was dealing with. The girls had written about strange lessons, rituals under the full moon, teas that made them see visions, and increasingly disturbing behavior from my grandmother as each girl disappeared. The last book, Lily's Black Book, contained the most detailed account. June 10, 1973. I know what happened to the others now. I found the hidden room while grandmother was in town. The altar, the symbols, the dolls with their hair. I understand why she chooses orphans. No one looks for us. No one questions when we disappear. But I won't be next. I've been pretending to drink the tea, storing herbs and making my own protective charms in secret. I think the others tried to fight too, but they didn't know what they were fighting. I do. I've been studying grandmother's books when she's asleep. I know the counterspell. Tonight, during the new moon, I'll perform it. If you're reading this and I'm gone, know that I tried to stop her. Look for my sign. I've hidden evidence where only someone like us would think to look. Someone like us? What did that mean? And what sign had Lily left? I spent the next day searching the house, ignoring knocks at the door and calls from various townspeople inviting me to dinners, events, and welcome parties. I knew what they really wanted now. It was in the garden that I finally found something. Behind the rose bushes, partially covered by years of growth, was a small stone marker. Carved into it was a lily, Lily's sign. I dug around it and uncovered a metal box. Inside was a small diary, newer than the books I'd found, and a small bottle of dried herbs. The diary belonged to my grandmother, with entries spanning from 1973 to just before her death. I flipped to the first entry. June 11, 1973. Lily is gone, but not in the way the others went. She attempted a counterspell during the ritual. There was an explosion of energy that destroyed the shed and nearly killed me. Her body was consumed entirely, but I fear her spirit remains bound to this place. The ritual was incomplete, and now I feel my powers fading faster than ever. I need a new vessel quickly. I continued reading, learning how my grandmother had decided to rebuild her ritual space in the basement, how the town elders had helped cover up the disappearances, and how she had continued her dark work over the decades, using girls from various orphanages and group homes, always those who wouldn't be missed. The most chilling entries were the most recent ones. January 15, 2023. My strength fades daily. The last ritual bought me less time than ever. I fear I've reached the end of what this method can provide. But there is another way. My own blood carries the potential for the greatest vessel of all. Eliza has the gift, though she doesn't know it. I've sent for her. February 2nd, 2023. Eliza refuses to visit. No matter. I've begun the transfer from afar. Each night I send my essence to her through the dreamways. She will feel it as nightmares, headaches, sudden intuitions. By the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late. When I die, she will be drawn here irresistibly. The house will call to her, and the cycle will begin anew. My grandmother had been feeding off vulnerable girls for decades to extend her life, and now she had set me up to continue her legacy, already beginning the process of transferring her power to me without my knowledge or consent. The diary's final entry, dated just a week before her death, read, "The preparations are complete. The new girls are chosen. The town will guide Eliza when I am gone. And if she resists, well, there are ways to convince even the most stubborn minds. After all, the hunger will grow in her, just as it grew in me. She will feed or she will wither. Those are the only choices." That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house made me jump. The headache that had been my constant companion since arriving in Milbrook had intensified to a sharp, stabbing pain behind my eyes. And I was hungry, ravenously, inexplicably hungry, though nothing in the kitchen appealed to me. It was nearing midnight when I heard it. Soft singing coming from the garden. A child's voice, sweet and clear in the darkness. I went to the window and looked out. In the moonlight stood a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, with long dark hair. She wore an old-fashioned dress and was singing a lullaby as she picked flowers. I blinked, and suddenly there were 7 girls in the garden, all in similar dresses, all with different colored hair. They formed a circle, holding hands, still singing. In the center of their circle was a dark shape, something growing from the ground like a twisted tree. I ran downstairs and out the back door. The garden was empty, the only movement coming from the rose bushes swaying in the breeze. But the singing continued, now seeming to come from inside the house. Back inside, I followed the sound to the basement door. It was open, though I was certain I had closed and locked it earlier. The singing grew louder as I went down the stairs. The hidden door to the ritual room stood wide open, light spilling out from within. Inside, the 7 girls stood in a circle around the altar. Upon closer inspection, I could see they weren't fully solid. Their forms shimmered and flickered like candle flames. Ghosts. The 7 vessels my grandmother had used and discarded. One of them, a girl with dark hair whom I somehow knew was Lily, stepped forward. "You found my sign," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "We've been waiting for someone to find it for a very long time. What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Freedom," said another girl, Emily, the first victim. "We're bound to this place, to the ritual that took our lives. We can't move on until the cycle is broken." "How do I break it?" Lily gestured to the altar. On it lay my grandmother's diary and the bottle of herbs I had found in the garden. "With knowledge and sacrifice. Your grandmother drew power from innocence. To undo what she did, you must give up the power she transferred to you, willingly and completely." "But I don't want her power. I never asked for it." "Yet you have it," said a third girl, Sarah. "It grows in you even now. Soon the hunger will be unbearable. You'll convince yourself that one life is a small price to pay for such power. That's how it begins." I thought of the headaches, the strange intuitions, the gnawing hunger that nothing could satisfy. They were right. Something was changing in me, something that both terrified and tempted me. "What do I need to do?" Lily approached the altar and pointed to the diary. "The counterspell is there, in your grandmother's own words. She recorded it after my attempt failed, to ensure it could never be used against her. But it requires a vessel of her own blood you to willingly surrender the power." I opened the diary to where a ribbon marked a page. The girl Lily nearly succeeded in her attempt to reverse the ritual. The counterspell requires one of my blood to stand at the altar during the dark of the moon and recite the incantation while burning the 7 herbs of reversal. Had she obtained my blood for the ritual, she might have succeeded in freeing the spirits and unmaking my work. I record this only as a warning to my successor. Guard against such attempts, for they would undo generations of accumulated power. The dark of the moon, a new moon, was tonight, and the bottle from the garden contained what I assumed were the 7 herbs of reversal that Lily had prepared 50 years ago. If I do this, I said slowly, what happens to me? The ghosts exchanged glances. We don't know, Lily admitted. No one has ever successfully completed the counterspell. You may lose whatever gifts you have. You may weaken. You may even die. The transfer your grandmother began was unnatural. Reversing it could have unpredictable consequences. I thought about what Mrs. Pendleton had said about the power to heal, to know things, to live for decades beyond a normal lifespan. Part of me, a dark, hungry part one hadn't known existed until now, wanted that power, craved it. But then I looked at the 7 girls, eternal children trapped in this house of horrors. And I knew I couldn't walk away. Whatever my grandmother had been, whatever she had tried to make me, I wouldn't continue her legacy. I'll do it, I said firmly. Tell me what to do. Under Lily's guidance, I prepared for the ritual. I sprinkled the dried herbs from the bottle onto the altar and lit them with a match. Then, following the counterspell written in my grandmother's diary, I began to chant in a language I somehow understood despite never having learned it. As I spoke, the air in the room grew thick and heavy. The flames from the burning herbs turned blue, then purple, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The 7 ghosts joined hands around me, their forms becoming more solid. As the ritual progressed, I felt something pulling at me from within, as if my very essence was being drawn out through invisible threads. It hurt, a deep tearing pain that made me want to stop, to run, to save myself. But I continued the chant, my voice growing stronger even as my body weakened. The ghosts began to glow brighter and brighter until they were almost too brilliant to look at. I could feel their joy, their relief, as the bonds that had held them for decades began to break. With the final words of the spell, there was a deafening crack like thunder directly overhead. The blue flames shot upward, engulfing me in cold fire that didn't burn. I felt something tear free from deep inside me, my grandmother's power, her essence, whatever dark gift she had tried to pass on to me. The world went white, then black. I woke to sunlight streaming through the basement windows. Windows I hadn't noticed before, now uncovered as if they had been hidden behind the false wall. The ritual room was gone. In its place was an ordinary basement corner with exposed foundation walls and a dirt floor. No altar, no symbols, no evidence of what had occurred. But in the dirt were 7 small indentations, as if 7 small bodies had lain there and recently been removed. I climbed the stairs on shaky legs, feeling both hollowed out and somehow lighter than before. The headache that had plagued me was gone, as was the strange hunger. I felt normal, human. Outside, the garden was in full bloom, more vibrant than it had been the day before. 7 different flowers had sprung up overnight where nothing had grown before. Roses, lilies, violets, daisies, pansies, tulips, and daffodils. I knew without being told that the girls were truly free now, their spirits released from their decades-long imprisonment. But my work wasn't done. There were still the new girls. Mrs. Pendleton had mentioned 7 more potential victims at the renamed orphanage. And there was a town full of people who had protected my grandmother, who had expected me to continue her dark legacy. I packed a bag, gathered the books and my grandmother's diary as evidence, and loaded everything into my car. Before leaving, I took one last look at the old house on Willow Lane. In the morning light, it seemed smaller somehow, less imposing, just an old house with too many secrets. As I drove toward the police station in the next county over, I thought about the choice I had made. I had given up power, immortality, abilities beyond normal human capacity. But I had gained something more important. My humanity, my soul, myself. The books of 7 lost girls had led me to a truth I never could have imagined. My grandmother had been a monster hiding behind a kind facade, and the town of Milbrook had been her accomplice, sacrificing vulnerable children to keep their protector strong. No one had questioned the girls' disappearances for 50 years, but I had found their books, heard their voices, and now their story would finally be told. As I crossed the town line, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. In my rearview mirror, I thought I saw 7 small figures standing by the road, waving goodbye. But when I blinked, they were gone, leaving only wildflowers swaying in the breeze where they had stood. Some stories aren't meant to stay buried forever. Some secrets demand to be revealed, no matter how dark, no matter how painful. And sometimes the most important choice we can make is to surrender power rather than abuse it. My name is Eliza Bennett, and this is the story of how I found 7 books and freed 7 souls. The story of how I learned that my own grandmother was a monster, and how I chose not to become one myself. The truth about the missing daughters of Milbrook would finally come to light. And whatever happened next, I would face it as myself, just Eliza, no more and no less. That, I decided, was enough. But that's not quite where this story ends. I drove straight to the state police headquarters, bypassing the local Milbrook authorities entirely. I spent hours giving my statement, showing them the books, the diary, and explaining everything I had learned. They were skeptical at first. Who wouldn't be? It sounded like the ravings of a mad woman. But the books were real, physical evidence, and the 7 names matched records of girls who had gone missing from St. Agnes' home in the early 1970s. We'll need to get a warrant to search the property, the detective in charge told me. And we'll need to investigate this Sunshine home you mentioned. In the meantime, Miss Bennett, I'd advise you not to return to Milbrook. If what you're saying is true, it could be dangerous for you there. I had no intention of going back. I checked into a motel outside of state lines and waited. 3 days later, the detective called me. "We've executed the search warrant," he said, his voice grim. "There was a fire at the house last night. By the time the fire department arrived, it was completely engulfed. Nothing left but ashes." My heart sank. The evidence gone. And there's more. We went to check out the Sunshine home for girls. The building exists, but it's abandoned. Has been for years, according to neighbors. And Mrs. Pendleton, the librarian you mentioned, no record of her employment at the Milbrook Library. According to their files, the head librarian for the past 30 years has been a Margaret Wheeler. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I spoke to her. I was in the library." "Miss Bennett, we've been making inquiries around town. Nobody remembers your grandmother taking in orphans. Nobody remembers a fire in 1973. And the town records show no Eleanor Bennett ever owning the property on Willow Lane. According to the deed, the house has belonged to the Milbrook Historical Society since 1925. "No," I said firmly. "I have proof. The books, which were lost in the fire." "Miss Bennett, I have to ask, have you been under psychiatric care recently?" I hung up. That night, I drove back to Milbrook, keeping to back roads and arriving after midnight. I parked a mile away and approached Willow Lane on foot, staying in the shadows. The house stood exactly as I had left it. There had been no fire. It loomed in the darkness, windows like watching eyes, the porch swing moving gently in the breeze, though there was no wind. From the edge of the property, I watched as lights moved inside the house, candles carried by robed figures moving from room to room. Through the windows, I could see them gathering in the living room, forming a circle. In the center stood Mrs. Pendleton, and beside her, a young girl with long dark hair. A new cycle was beginning. I backed away, stumbling over unseen roots, my heart pounding. This wasn't over. The town had closed ranks, erased records, created a new reality where my grandmother's crimes had never happened. And now they were continuing her work, perhaps with a new vessel of their own choosing. As I turned to flee, I almost ran directly into a small figure standing on the path. I stifled a scream as I recognized her. Lily, the last of my grandmother's victims, her form still shimmering with that otherworldly light. "You came back," she said, sounding both surprised and sad. "The ritual didn't work," I gasped. "You're still here, and They're starting again. Lily shook her head. The ritual worked. We're free to move on, but I chose to stay to watch, to warn the next one if I could. The others crossed over. Warn the next one? You mean the new girl they have? No, Lily said softly. I mean you. You're still part of this, Eliza. The power your grandmother began to transfer to you. It's dormant now, buried deep, but not gone. As long as you live, they'll try to awaken it, to bring you back into the fold. They need a Bennett to continue the ritual properly. The power flows strongest through your bloodline. But I rejected it. I protested. I gave it up. You suppressed it. Lily corrected me. But it's like a dormant seed within you. They'll find ways to make it grow again, to corrupt you slowly until you embrace it willingly. How do I stop them? How do I end this for good? Lily's form flickered, growing fainter. Find the source. Your grandmother didn't create this ritual. She inherited it just as she planned for you to inherit it. There's a book older than any in her collection. The original grimoire. Destroy it, and you destroy the foundation of their power. Where is it? I don't know, she admitted. But there's someone who might. Robert Miller, the fire chief from the newspaper article. He'd be ancient by now, if he's even still alive. But his son, the knowledge passes down through certain families in Milbrook, just as the power passes through yours. The Millers were record keepers. If anyone knows where the grimoire is hidden, it would be them. Before I could ask more questions, Lily's form dispersed like smoke in the wind, leaving me alone in the darkness. I retreated to my car and drove to a different motel, farther away from Milbrook. There I did what any journalist would do. I began to research. Robert Miller had indeed passed away in 1998, but his son James Miller still lived in Milbrook and had followed in his father's footsteps, serving as fire chief until his retirement 5 years ago. He now ran a small bookstore on Main Street called Miller's Rarities. The next day, disguised with a wig and sunglasses, I returned to Milbrook. The bookstore was a small, dusty place tucked between a cafe and a hardware store. A bell jingled as I entered, and an elderly man looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice rough with age. I approached carefully. "I'm looking for information about Eleanor Bennett." His expression didn't change, but I noticed his hand slip beneath the counter. "Tourist? We get a lot of folks interested in local history." "Not exactly," I said, removing my sunglasses. "My name is Eliza Bennett. Eleanor was my grandmother." The hand beneath the counter stilled. He studied me for a long moment before sighing heavily. "I wondered if you'd come. Lock the door." He flipped the sign to closed. Once we were alone, he led me to a back room filled with books much older and more valuable than those in the front. He gestured for me to sit in a worn leather chair while he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal bottle. "You look like her," he said, handing me a glass. "The way she looked when she was young, before she started the rituals." "You knew about what she did to those girls?" He nodded grimly. "My father knew first. That fire in '73, he was the one who found the bodies, or what was left of them. 7 small skeletons in the ashes of that shed. He confronted Eleanor, but by then half the town was under her influence. The mayor, the police chief, the judge, all beneficiaries of her blessings. Healthier crops, healthier children, longer lives. All for the small price of looking the other way when troubled orphan girls went missing. And you? Were you under her influence too?" Miller shook his head. "The Millers have always been resistant record keepers, witnesses. We observe and document, but don't interfere. It's our burden to know the truth but be powerless to stop it." "I'm trying to stop it," I said firmly. "I performed a counterspell that one of the girls, Lily, had prepared. It freed their spirits, but the ritual is starting again. They have a new girl, and they've erased all evidence of what happened. Changed records, fooled the police. It's like my grandmother's crimes never existed." "The counterspell," Miller mused. "I'm impressed you managed that. But it only broke the bond between the spirits and the ritual space. It didn't destroy the ritual itself. For that, you need the original grimoire." "That's what Lily told me." She said you might know where it is. Miller took a long sip of his drink before responding. I don't know exactly where it is, but I know who has it. Your grandmother's successor, Mrs. Pendleton. Martha Pendleton? Yes, she was your grandmother's closest disciple. They were more than friends. This was a detail I hadn't considered, but it explained Mrs. Pendleton's devotion. So she has the grimoire. How do I get it from her? You don't, Miller said bluntly. That book is protected by blood magic. Only a Bennett can touch it without dying instantly. That's why they need you. Without a Bennett to lead the rituals to handle the grimoire, they can only accomplish lesser magics. They can maintain what power they have, but not increase it. So I need to find this grimoire and destroy it myself. It won't be easy. Martha will have hidden it somewhere secure, somewhere with both physical and magical protections. And the moment you set foot in Milbrook again, they'll know they're connected to the land itself. They can feel the presence of a Bennett. I thought for a moment. You said my grandmother's crimes were erased from the records, but you still remember. Why weren't you affected? Miller smiled thinly and pulled aside his collar, revealing a strange symbol tattooed on his neck. Protection rune. Been in my family for generations. Blocks magical influence. Won't stop a direct attack, but prevents the subtle workings like memory manipulation. Can I get one? Wouldn't work for you. You're a Bennett. The magic is part of you whether you want it or not. Any rune I gave you would eventually be corrupted by your own innate power. It seemed hopeless. I couldn't return to Milbrook without being detected, couldn't approach Mrs. Pendleton without endangering myself, and couldn't even protect my own mind from their influence. But then I remembered something from my grandmother's diary, something about the transfer of power being incomplete, about sending her essence to me through the dreamways. The dreams, I said suddenly. Before I came to Milbrook, I had strange dreams about the house, about a group of people in robes. That was her, wasn't it? Reaching out to me even before she died. Miller nodded. Dreamwalking is one of the oldest skills. It allows for connection across great distances. Could I do it? Could I use this power? I apparently have to find the grimoire without physically being in Milbrook? He considered this. It's possible. Dangerous, but possible. You'd need something to focus on, something connected to both Martha and the grimoire. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small object I'd taken from my grandmother's desk. A golden key on a fine chain. Would this work? I found it in my grandmother's study. It has Mrs. Pendleton's initials engraved on it. Miller's eyes widened. A lover's token. Yes, that would create a strong connection. But Eliza, if you attempt to dreamwalk, you risk awakening the very power you're trying to destroy. And if they sense you in the dreamways, they can trap you there, turn your mind inside out until you're nothing but a hollow vessel for their will. I don't have a choice, I said firmly. They have another girl. How many more will disappear if I don't stop this? With reluctance, Miller agreed to help me prepare for the dreamwalk. He closed his shop and we spent the rest of the day and well into the evening studying his family's records of Bennett rituals and practicing meditation techniques that would help me navigate the dreamways. The key, he explained, is to maintain your sense of self. The dreamways will try to fragment you, to make you forget why you're there. Hold on to your purpose, and don't be distracted by what you see. That night, in a small room above Miller's shop, I lay on a narrow bed, the golden key clutched in my hand. Miller had drawn a circle of protective symbols around the bed and placed candles at the four corners. Remember, he said as he prepared to leave, find the grimoire, see where it's hidden, then return to your body. Don't try to destroy it in the dreamways, it won't work. Once you know its location, we can plan how to retrieve it physically. I nodded, already feeling drowsy from the tea he had given me. A blend of herbs to help open the mind to the dreamways. And Eliza, he added, his voice grave, if you feel yourself being pulled too deep, if you start to lose yourself, use this. He placed a small silver bell on the bedside table. The sound will anchor you, help you find your way back. As he left, turning out the light and closing the door, I closed my eyes and focused on the key in my hand, imagining it growing warm, creating a connection between me and its former owner. The transition to the dreamways wasn't like falling asleep. It was more like sinking through the bed, through the floor, through layers of reality until I was somewhere else entirely. A misty landscape where shapes formed and dissolved like smoke. I concentrated on the key, now glowing with a soft golden light, pulling me forward through the mist. Gradually, the dreamscape solidified into a familiar setting. The Milbrook Public Library. It was night, the building dark except for a single light burning in the back office. I moved toward it, floating rather than walking, passing through walls as if they were no more substantial than the mist had been. In the office sat Mrs. Pendleton, but not as I had known her. Here in the dreamways, she appeared younger, more vital, her gray hair now a rich auburn. She was writing in a large book, her pen moving across the page with practiced precision. As I watched, unseen, I realized this must be a current scene Martha Pendleton updating the Coven's records after beginning the new cycle with the girl I had seen through the window. I concentrated on the golden key in my hand, willing it to show me what I sought. The scene shifted, melting away like wax under a flame, reforming into a different location. Mrs. Pendleton's home. A Victorian house not unlike my grandmother's, but smaller, painted a deep burgundy with black trim. Inside, I watched as Mrs. Pendleton entered a study lined with bookshelves. She approached one shelf and pressed a hidden switch. The shelf swung outward, revealing a small hidden room beyond. Inside was a pedestal, and on the pedestal sat a book, the grimoire. It was bound in what looked like dark leather, its cover emblazoned with symbols similar to those I had seen in the ritual room. Even in the dreamways, I could feel its power, a pulsing malevolence that made the air around it shimmer. Mrs. Pendleton didn't touch the book. Instead, she stood before it, head bowed, lips moving in silent prayer or incantation. Then she stepped back, closed the hidden door, and left the study. I had found it. Now I needed to return to my body and tell Miller what I had seen. But as I turned to leave, something caught my attention. A shimmer in the air, like heat rising from pavement. The shimmer coalesced into a figure I recognized all too well. My grandmother, not as she had been when she died, old and withered despite her rituals, but as she must have been in her prime, tall, regal, with long dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. "Eliza," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the dreamways. "You've come home at last." I tried to back away but found myself unable to move. "You're dead. This is just a dream, a memory." She smiled, a cold curve of lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Death is just another doorway for those who know how to walk the old paths. I've been waiting for you, my dear, waiting for you to embrace your heritage." "I rejected it," I said firmly. "I broke the ritual. I freed the girls." "Did you?" she gestured, and suddenly we were back in the ritual room beneath my grandmother's house. But it wasn't empty as I had left it. 7 small skeletons lay in a circle around the altar, each adorned with a different colored ribbon. Red, blue, green, purple, yellow, orange, and black. "Their bodies remain bound to this place," my grandmother said, "and a part of their essence with them. The ritual can never truly be broken while their bones remain. And while the ritual endures, so do I. And so does the power within you." I felt a pull then, a terrible hunger awakening inside me. It was the same feeling I had experienced in the house, but stronger now, more demanding. I looked down at my hands and saw they were glowing with the same golden light as the key. "Yes," my grandmother whispered, moving closer. "Feel it. The power that is your birthright. The power to transcend death itself." For a moment I was tempted. The hunger was so strong, the promise of power so alluring. I could feel it surging through me, showing me glimpses of what I could become, ageless, fearless, able to bend reality to my will. But then I remembered the 7 girls, their lives cut short by this same temptation. I remembered Lily's face as she warned me, the hope in her eyes when I performed the counterspell. And I thought of the new girl now in Mrs. Pendleton's clutches, awaiting the same fate. "No," I said, the word tearing from my throat with physical force. This isn't power. It's parasitism, feeding on innocence to extend your own miserable existence. I want no part of it. My grandmother's face contorted with rage. Foolish child, you think you have a choice? The power is already within you. It grows stronger each day. Soon the hunger will be unbearable, and you will feed, just as I did, just as every Bennett woman has since the grimoire came into our possession. Every Bennett woman? I repeated, a realization dawning. So it wasn't just you. This has been happening for generations. Since 1847, when your great-great-grandmother Abigail Bennett discovered the grimoire in the ruins of a European castle and brought it to America. She built Milbrook around it, gathered followers, created a haven where the old ways could continue undetected. 7 generations of Bennett women, each stronger than the last, and each one murdering innocent girls to extend their lives, I said bitterly. Sacrifices must be made for power, my grandmother replied coldly. You'll understand in time. I clutched the key tighter, focusing on my purpose, fighting against her influence. I will never understand. And I will destroy the grimoire, end this cycle once and for all. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You can't destroy it. It's protected by blood magic. Only a Bennett can touch it, but no Bennett would ever destroy it. The hunger wouldn't allow it. But even as she spoke, I felt something else fighting against the hunger within me. A fierce determination, a moral clarity that felt like my true self pushing back against her influence. Watch me, I said. I concentrated on the silver bell Miller had given me, visualizing it, hearing its clear tone in my mind. The dreamscape shuddered, my grandmother's form becoming less substantial. You can't escape your destiny, Eliza, she called as she faded. The Bennett legacy will claim you in the end. I woke with a gasp, the key clutched so tightly in my hand that it had left an imprint on my palm. Sunlight streamed through the window. I had been in the dreamways all night. Miller was beside me instantly, helping me sit up, offering a glass of water. Did you find it? He asked anxiously. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak at first. After taking a sip of water, I described what I had seen. Mrs. Pendleton's house, the hidden room, the grimoire on its pedestal. And then, haltingly, I told him about my encounter with my grandmother's spirit and what she had revealed about the Bennett legacy. 7 generations, Miller murmured. That explains a lot. My family's records only go back to the founding of Milbrook, but there were always rumors about the Bennett women, about their unnatural longevity and strange powers. She said I can't destroy the grimoire, I said. That the hunger wouldn't let me. Miller was silent for a long moment. There might be a way, he finally said, but it's dangerous and would require a sacrifice of a different kind. What kind of sacrifice? Your connection to the Bennett line. The very thing that allows you to touch the grimoire without dying would have to be severed. How is that possible? Blood magic can be countered with blood magic. If you were to dilute your Bennett blood with that of a Miller, it might create a loophole of sorts, enough Bennett blood to touch the grimoire, but enough Miller blood to resist its influence long enough to destroy it. I stared at him. Are you suggesting a blood transfusion? He shook his head. Nothing so clinical. The old ways require a more primal exchange, a binding of bloodlines through sacred ritual. You mean marriage? I said flatly. A handfasting, technically temporary but magically binding. It would join our bloodlines for a brief period, long enough for you to retrieve and destroy the grimoire. Afterward, the bond could be severed and you would be free. It sounded archaic, superstitious, but after everything I had seen and experienced, I couldn't dismiss it. And this would work? It would let me destroy the grimoire without the hunger stopping me. I believe so, Miller said. The protection rune that blocks magical influence in my family would temporarily extend to you through the bond. It might be enough to counter the hunger. I thought about it. A temporary magical marriage to a man old enough to be my father. All to destroy a book that had caused 7 generations of suffering. It was absurd. And yet, let's do it, I said decisively. Tonight. And tomorrow we go after the grimoire. The handfasting ritual was simpler than I had expected. An exchange of vows, a binding of hands with a cord, a mingling of blood from small cuts on our palms. Miller spoke words in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood, invoking ancient powers to witness and bless our temporary union. As the ritual concluded, I felt a strange sensation, a cooling of the hunger that had been growing inside me, as if it had been doused with water. Not extinguished completely, but diminished. Manageable. Did it work? I asked as Miller bandaged my palm. We won't know for certain until you try to touch the grimoire, he said. But I can see the change in your aura. The Bennett fire is banked for now. We spent the rest of the evening planning our approach. Mrs. Pendleton's house was on Oak Street, a quiet residential area near the library. According to Miller, she lived alone and spent most days at the library. Our best chance would be to enter during her working hours. What about magical protections? I asked. Won't she have wards or alarms? Undoubtedly, but they'll be keyed to keep out non-Bennetts. With your blood, you should be able to pass through them undetected. And with our bond, I should be able to follow in your wake. The next morning, we drove separately to Milbrook, approaching from different directions to avoid drawing attention. I parked several blocks from Oak Street and walked, keeping my head down, wearing the same wig and sunglasses from before. Miller would meet me behind Mrs. Pendleton's house at exactly 10 a.m., when the library would be opening and she would be settling into her day's work. The burgundy Victorian looked just as it had in my dream vision, right down to the black trim and the neatly kept garden. I made my way to the back of the property, where a high fence surrounded a small yard. Miller was already there, waiting in the shadow of a large oak tree. Any sign of her? I whispered as I approached. He shook his head. Her car left about 20 minutes ago. But be careful. She might have left magical sentries. I placed my hand on the gate and felt a faint vibration, like distant thunder. There's something here, I murmured. A barrier of some kind. Can you pass through it? I pushed gently on the gate. For a moment there was resistance, then a sensation like breaking through a soap bubble. The gate swung open. Yes, follow directly behind me. Stay in my footsteps. We crossed the yard and approached the back door. Again, I felt the resistance of a magical barrier, and again, my Bennett blood allowed me to break through it. The door itself was locked with a conventional deadbolt, which Miller picked with practiced ease. Inside, the house was dim and smelled of herbs and old books, a scent remarkably similar to my grandmother's house. We moved silently through the kitchen and into a hallway lined with photographs. I paused, recognizing one face among the many. My grandmother, looking much younger, arm in arm with a young Martha Pendleton. This way, I whispered, leading Miller toward what I knew was the study. The layout matched my dream vision perfectly, right down to the arrangement of furniture and the specific bookshelf that concealed the hidden room. I approached the shelf, running my fingers along its edge until I found the hidden switch, a small knot in the wood that depressed under pressure. There was a soft click, and the shelf swung outward, revealing the hidden room beyond. Just as in my vision, a pedestal stood in the center of the small space, and on it lay the grimoire. Up close, I could see that what I had taken for leather was actually something else, something that made my stomach turn. The book was bound in human skin, the cover a patchwork of different tones stitched together with what looked like hair. 7 skins, Miller murmured from behind me. One from each generation's first victim. The hunger stirred within me at the sight of the book, a yearning to possess it, to open it, to absorb its dark knowledge. But the Miller blood now mingled with mine kept the feeling at bay, like watching a storm from behind thick glass. How do we destroy it? I asked, not daring to touch it yet. Miller reached into his pocket and produced a small vial of clear liquid. Holy water, blessed by 7 different faiths. And this. He handed me a silver dagger with strange symbols etched into the blade. It needs to be stabbed through the center and doused with the water, then burned. All by your hand. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Here goes nothing. As I reached for the grimoire, the air in the room seemed to thicken. A low humming filled my ears, and the hunger within me surged against its bonds. demanding that I stop, that I embrace the book rather than destroy it. For a moment, my hand froze inches from the cover. "Eliza," Miller said urgently, "remember why you're here. Remember the 7 girls. Remember Lily." Lily's face flashed in my mind, her hope, her trust, her sacrifice. With a surge of determination, I grabbed the grimoire. The moment my fingers touched the cover, pain shot up my arm, a burning sensation that felt like acid in my veins. The book seemed to writhe beneath my grasp, as if alive and fighting against me. But I held on, lifting it from the pedestal. "Now," Miller urged. "Do it now." With my other hand, I raised the silver dagger and plunged it through the center of the grimoire. The book let out a sound like a scream, high and inhuman. Black liquid that looked like blood oozed from the wound, smoking where it touched the silver blade. Miller unstopped the vial of holy water and handed it to me. I poured it over the grimoire, my hands, and the dagger. The screaming intensified, and the book began to smolder, the human skin binding blistering and peeling away. "Fire!" I gasped, the pain in my arm now spreading to my chest, making it hard to breathe. Miller produced a lighter and flicked it to life. I held the grimoire over the flame, and it caught immediately, burning with unnatural intensity. The flames shifting between colors: black, green, purple, blue. As the grimoire burned, I felt something break inside me, a connection severing, a presence withdrawing. The hunger that had been growing since I arrived in Milbrook abruptly vanished, leaving me feeling lighter, cleaner. The book crumbled to ash in my hands, the silver dagger clattering to the floor, its blade now melted and twisted. The ashes continued to burn even after the book was completely consumed, until nothing remained but a fine gray powder. "Is it done?" I asked, my voice weak. Miller nodded, his face pale but relieved. "It's done. The grimoire is destroyed, and with it, the foundation of the Bennett legacy." We didn't linger. After collecting the melted dagger and sweeping the ashes into a small bag, "We'll dispose of these in running water, just to be safe," Miller explained. We left the house as quietly as we had entered. Outside, the world seemed brighter somehow, the colors more vivid, the air cleaner. I felt like I was truly seeing Milbrook for the first time, not as a place of hidden horrors, but just as a small town, ordinary and unremarkable. But our work wasn't finished. There was still the matter of the new girl in Mrs. Pendleton's custody, and the 7 generations of victims whose stories deserved to be told. We separated again, Miller returning to his shop while I made my way to the Sunshine Home for Girls. It was a modern building on the outskirts of town that didn't look abandoned at all, despite what the police had told me. Children played in a fenced yard under the watchful eyes of caretakers. Among them, I spotted a girl with long dark hair, the same girl I had seen through the window of my grandmother's house. I approached the fence, catching her eye. She came over, curious but wary. "Hello," I said softly. "My name is Eliza. What's yours?" "Madeline," she replied. "Madeline, has a woman named Mrs. Pendleton been visiting you? Maybe talking about special lessons or a special home?" The girl's eyes widened. "How did you know?" She said, "I'm going to live in her house soon. That I'm a special girl." My heart clenched. "Listen to me, Madeline. I need you to stay away from Mrs. Pendleton. She's not a good person." Before I could say more, an alarm sounded from the building. One of the caretakers had spotted me and was heading our way with a phone in hand, presumably calling the police. "I have to go," I told Madeline quickly. "But remember what I said. And if you can, warn the other girls too." I hurried away, ducking down side streets until I reached my car. As I drove out of Milbrook, I called the state police detective who had dismissed my claims earlier. "I need to report a suspicious individual," I said when he answered. "Martha Pendleton, head librarian at Milbrook Public Library. She's been visiting the Sunshine Home for Girls, targeting a child named Madeline." "Miss Bennett, we've been through this." "Check the records again," I interrupted. "Now that the grimoire is destroyed, they can't maintain the illusion. The truth will start breaking through." Whether he believed me or not, the seed was planted. And with the grimoire gone, the magical influence over the town would begin to fade. Records that had been altered would revert to their true state. Memories that had been suppressed would resurface. The truth about the missing daughters of Milbrook would finally come to light. I met Miller one last time at a diner outside of town. We completed the ritual to sever our temporary bond, another simple ceremony involving the untying of knots and a formal declaration of separation. "What will happen now?" I asked as we sat over coffee afterward. "To Mrs. Pendleton and the others who were involved? Without the grimoire, their power will fade," Miller explained. "Not overnight. They've been practicing for decades, and some magic will linger, but they won't be able to perform the rituals that gave them their unnatural longevity. They'll start aging normally, and eventually justice will catch up to them." "And the Bennett legacy? Is it truly broken?" He studied me thoughtfully. "The magical lineage, yes, the grimoire was its source. But you're still a Bennett, Eliza. You still have a choice about what kind of legacy you want to create." I thought about the 7 books, miraculously unharmed in my car despite the alleged fire at my grandmother's house. 7 voices that deserved to be heard. 7 stories that needed to be told. "I know exactly what kind of legacy I want to create," I said. 1 year later, my book was published, The Missing Daughters of Milbrook, a journalist's investigation into 7 forgotten lives. It told the story of Emily, Sarah, Rebecca, Violet, Charlotte, Abigail, and Lily, not as victims, but as brave young women who had fought against a darkness they barely understood. The book sparked a formal investigation, leading to the arrest of Martha Pendleton and several other Milbrook residents. Excavations at my grandmother's property uncovered human remains in the basement. 7 small skeletons, finally receiving proper burials after decades hidden in the darkness. The Sunshine Home for Girls was shut down, its residents transferred to better facilities with proper oversight. Madeline sent me a letter thanking me for warning her, telling me she was happy in her new home with a foster family that truly cared for her. As for me, I kept the old Victorian house on Willow Lane, but I didn't live there. Instead, I had it converted into a community center for at-risk youth, a place of learning and healing rather than secrecy and suffering. A place where the legacy of the Bennett name could finally be something good. I still have nightmares sometimes, dreams of my grandmother's face, of the grimoire, of 7 small ghosts dancing in a circle. But they're just dreams now, with no power to harm or control me. No one questioned the girls' disappearances for 50 years, but I found their books, and through them I found the truth. I found my own power, not in dark rituals or extended life, but in bringing light to hidden places, in giving voice to the silenced, in choosing a different path than the one laid out for me by blood and history. Some legacies are meant to be broken. Some cycles need to end. And sometimes the most important story is the one that almost went untold. My name is Eliza Bennett, and this is how I rewrote my family's story. Not with magic, but with truth. The truth about 7 missing daughters, a grimoire bound in human skin, and a small town that kept its secrets for far too long.